Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Tea with Crema. My name is Chris. I'll be one of your hosts today, and I'm joined by my best friend, Emma.
Hello, everyone.
Today, we are talking about the right time to do everything. Because you know, growing up, everyone told you that you had a certain amount of time to get all of the important checkboxes marked off your list. And if you didn't, you were a failure, or a cat lady, or a weirdo. And so today we're looking at all of those times that anyone ever called us a cat lady or a weirdo and really figuring out, like, did that impact us at all? Do we need additional therapy sessions? Obviously we do. Welcome to today's episode, everyone. Thank you so much. Before we begin, we want to do our tea check. So...
That was the literal longest intro I've ever heard in my life, but it kept getting better. So I was just like, okay, I'm just gonna let him go. I'm not gonna cut him off. What are we doing now? Checking in our tea?
We're doing our tea check. Thank you so much.
How do I even follow up with that? Today I'm drinking a Very Berry Singer by Celestial. Very good. It's a little tart when you're just drinking it as hot tea. So I did add some sugar into it, and I will say that it is delicious. Would love this over some ice. I think it would be a hit. What are you drinking today, Christopher?
Today, I have a French tea. It is Croquembouche au chocolat by Chez Lulu, which translates to Some Baked Good with Chocolate by the House of Lulu. And I was really skeptical at first because the last time I tried a chocolate tea, it tasted like a very, very watered down hot chocolate, like terribly watered down. But honestly, this one is not as bad as I thought it was going to be. So it has like a pure tea. It says it has the chocolate flakes, and I literally saw the chocolate flakes in the tea. So that was quite interesting. And then it has cinnamon, apple bits, caramel bits, almond bits, and safflower petals. And honestly, it is not as bad as I thought it was going to be.
That's good.
I thought it was going to be trash, and it actually has worked out really well. I don't know how they did it, but they did it.
That's
so
nice.
I would have to give this a solid 3.5 out of 5. I would drink it again. I would not order it specifically, but I would drink it again.
I wonder if it's one of those that you could add cream to, and then it would be more, more chocolatey creamy than water chocolatey, watery chocolate.
I'll try it for sure, and we'll see what happens. But so far, honestly, not bad. Not bad for a chocolate tea, honestly.
That's awesome. Okay. Well, I guess we will just hop right into it. So, talking about the right time. So, I just want to shout out our friend Now. She's the one who was the inspiration behind this episode. We had posed a question on Instagram probably towards the end of last year and asked what are some topics that you'd like us to discuss, and this was one of them, talking about the right time. So, what was your ideal time for marriage, your child, a child, possibly a career when you were younger? What did you think that you would get all of these things done? Or did you even have a thought that you would have X amount of things done by X age?
I don't think I cared for any of these things until high school. Honestly, I was living my best or worst childhood life, depending on who you ask. I thought it was okay. But different people get different opinions. So I didn't care about any of this stuff until high school. And that's because everyone was talking about it all the time. So I didn't really have a choice but to think about it. And so for me, I was of the mindset that my career would come right after college. I would go to college. I would do my career, whatever my career was going to be. And I would do that until I retired and then die. So that was my understanding of careers. That's just what I thought people did. You go to school as long as you want to go to school, you get a job, and then you just do that job or similar jobs until you've reached a point of no return, and that's your life. And so that was my ideal time, 22, work until forever. Children, I decided that if I were going to have any, it was going to be before I was 30, and that was just because my mom had me fairly young in her life, and I enjoyed having a younger parent who was able to keep up with the rigorous demands of teenage life. So she was out there with us. We went on really awesome trips together. I'm not saying an older parent can't do all that. I'm just saying that I had an experience with a younger parent and enjoyed that experience. And so I wanted to also be a younger parent doing those things. And so I cut it off. I was like, if it's not, my imaginary line right now is 30. If it hasn't happened before then, I've just said that it's not going to happen. That actually has not changed for me, but it is what it is. And then marriage is murky. I don't really know I've gone back and forth about marriage a lot of times in my life, and I don't really know. That was one of those things. I don't know. People never put pressure on me to be married. So I don't know. I've never had like a real answer in terms of like, this is when it has to happen. What about you? Did you have all these lined up, planned out in your Pinterest board?
I sure did. Looking at my Pinterest of wedding 2012. Hello. Those are some not good years. Now I'm seeing people on TikTok are starting to clown their wedding boards on Pinterest, and it is hilarious because all of those pins were my pins too. I think I was pretty much the same. I think that, and I don't know if it's like being like a girl or like being a woman, that girls talk about it more, and I don't even want to put that generalization out there either, but I feel like I always had these conversations, and it was, I think, definitely growing up Mormon, like you definitely have these conversations very often and very young. So like you move from primary, which is basically like the children's program, at 11, not 12, and then you enter the young women's program at 12. And by that point, you're starting to get lessons on how to be a good housewife and how to be a good wife and a good caretaker. So I think from the time I was 12, like I always, in my head, 12-year-old me knew that I was going to get married in the temple. I knew I was going to have children, but I also knew I was going to go to college. So like in my head, I was always thinking like, okay, well, when I go to college, like how am I going to find a partner that's like a member? Like that's the big thing too, right? Is marrying someone who's also from the church. And it was this whole thing. Anyway, I think as we like moved away from the church, like definitely in high school, I would think like, okay, 10 years from now, I'll be like 25, I'll be 26. And I definitely thought I would be married with at least one child by 25. And to me, like 25 seemed so old, right? Like it seemed like, oh, I'm so grown up, all these things. Obviously 25 came and went. But I also knew in my head that I would be okay if I had children when I was older. Like my mom was an older parent with both my sister and I. And, I think it, in the same way that it like, like you said, like your mom kept up with you, like I felt like my mom kept up with us very well too. But then Isaac has the opposite. Like he's experienced the opposite thing where his dad was a little bit older. Isaac's also the last child he's the 7th child. And he feels like his parents didn't keep up with him by the time that he was, born and everything as much as they did. And they weren't as active as they were when they were, with the first couple of siblings. Also, by the time you're at number 7, like, why can't you take care of yourself?
There may or may not be some autopilot things kind of happening amongst the collective.
And so he had very differing opinions. Like I remember us being like teenagers and I'd be like, when do you want to have your first kid? And he'd be like, oh, definitely like 19 or 20. And I was like, 19 or 20 is like in 2 years, sir. I was like, I don't know who you're having a child with, but it's not me. And he just kind of like, he was like, what do you mean? I was like, well, if you want to have a child at 19 or 20, like good luck. Like I still live with my parents. Like I do not have a paycheck. I am in no shape, way, or form. Like, and my sister had, maybe Vake was like 2 or 3 by that point. So I had known like what it was to like see the costs of childcare, the cost of like diapers and things like that. And I was like, I cannot afford that. Like I make $10 an hour. And when I make that $10 an hour, it goes towards gas to come see you. And I remember him saying like, I just don't want to be an old parent. Like I just want to be able to run around with my kids. And I could never wrap my head around like, you can still be an older parent and be active. My mom was like in those classes and like walking around the park and doing all those things at like 30, 35. So it didn't occur to me that like being older meant that you weren't going to be like as active. But yeah, I definitely thought I would have all of those, like at least marriage and child by 25. Career, I always assumed, similar to you, like you start your career after you get out of college and then you just do that for the rest of your life. And I think it wasn't until like my sister started going back to nursing school that I saw like, oh, you can pivot and it's okay to pivot. You don't have to stay in this career for the rest of your life, because everyone in my life up until that point had only ever stayed in their one career that they started, right? It was very uncommon for them to like pivot into these new places and these new careers and things like that. So yeah, definitely did not meet those times. But why do you think that there's like such an expectation to get everything done at these times? I think that's like the bigger issue, right?
I mean, I think part of it is whether we like it or not, everyone does have a finite amount of time. You just do. And I think part of it is we also know, just talking about things like our knees giving out, that you also have a finite amount of time in your prime, essentially, in your physical prime. And so there are certain things that I would imagine that are just easier when you are in your physical prime. So you're not going to convince me that bending down to pick over a child is as easy at 20 as it is at 25, 30, 35, 40. Picking up, having to get that newborn up and down, it hits different at all of those different ages. So, I would imagine that part of it is just there are just some biological things that happen that we cannot control. We just got to be ready to deal with those things. As far as like why it's so young, I think in part because it used to be affordable to do it at that time, in those time frames. You could have a child and afford to have a child before you were 30 at one point in history. You could do that. It was affordable with a stay at home in a house, not an apartment, in a house.
On a working, a working class wage, it was doable. And I think that's sometimes where it kind of gets to me too, is thinking about I remember there was a certain point where it felt like we had just started teaching and everyone was getting married, all these people were getting married. There were so many posts about oh, I'm engaged, oh, I'm getting married. And I think right now I'm experiencing a second wave, or it might just be because now I'm married that I'm starting to see it come back again. And it feels like it's those every 5 years that you see this huge wave of people getting married, people having kids, now those people that were getting married 5 years ago, now they're having kids. And I'm now at this point where I'm getting married. And I'm oh God, am I behind? But again, at the end of the day, who's paying my bills? So to be behind or to be anything like that, it's all on my time. And I still struggle though, thinking about man, as a kid, I really thought that by 25, I would have all of this stuff on lock. I thought I would really be done. And, and I think also having our cousins around us who are having kids really young, one of our cousins, she has 5 kids, and she's our age. And the oldest one is now in elementary school. And I just think man, when I have kids and they're in elementary school, we're going to be, the older parents, we're going to be what my parents were. And, just always thinking about that. And I always think about as I pick something up and my knees are creaking, how am I going to pick up a 10 pound baby? How am I going to navigate
repeatedly,
all of
over and over again?
Because they just don't ever want to be put down
in one place.
So it always makes me really sit down and really think. And I'm I really enjoy the way my life is. And, is our kids part of that still? Is that a reality for me? As soon as Isaac and I got married, literally that day, people were okay, when are the kids coming? What? We just got married. The ink is still wet. I'm pretty sure I have 90 days to annul this. But it was so easy for everyone to just be okay, where are the kids? And I wonder, do they ask men that? Do they do that? Is that a thing?
I get asked all the time, when are you having kids? When's the first kid? All the time. So maybe. And my answer is farther and farther away, because the older I get, the more I see y'all with these kids.
And I think that also keeps me jaded too, right? Being a teacher.
I mean, I'm sure that's part of it. It's not even, that part doesn't, being a teacher never impacted my viewpoint on having children, in the sense of just making sure I just wanted to be very confident that I was ready whenever that happened. I think more so the people that I know having kids, because I can actually ask them and I can see the things that they're going through. I can see how expensive things like childcare and daycare are. I can see the impacts of things like postpartum depression after you have a child, but not having enough maternity leave in this country to actually be able to go through and deal with all of those things, because you have 6 weeks, maybe 12, to have had the baby, to have physically recovered yourself, to have bonded with the baby as much as you can in that time, to have gone through postpartum, to then get ready to essentially ship your kid off to strangers for the entire time that you're at work. And so for me, it was just one of those things that if I was going to have kids, I wanted to make sure that there are certain things that I wanted to be very true for me to have kids. And honestly, with the way inflation and just even the economic factors, not including the fact that as I get older and the longer I stay independent, the harder it is to then want to not have those things. I can just pick up and go on vacations. I can just pick up and go and do certain things. And so the act of breaking myself out of that habit, and then also looking at the cost of literally everything constantly go up, there was that whole formula shortage a few months ago. And I'm sure that had people stressed to the max, literally to the like breaking point, I would imagine. And so I just don't, it was always just the people around me that it just didn't make any sense. And then when you read about climate science, it just, I don't know, man.
Is there even going to be a world left, like an Earth for our children to inhabit?
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, the reality is like the expectations are there for, I mean, it makes sense. Like all of the things make sense. I get why the expectations are there. I think I'm just at a point where I'm like, I'm going to do what works for me because, again, y'all want me to have kids, but I don't see any of y'all signing up to help pay bills in the meantime.
Yep. And like, I think it's different to being in Japan and seeing what healthcare and like maternal care could be. You know, every time I see one of my friends in Japan having kids, I'm like, man, the US could never. Like, especially seeing my sister's own birth story, not birth story, but birth journeys. You know, she's had 3 kids so far. And with each kid, like, she's been in the hospital maybe 2 or 3 days, 2 days max. You know, they have the baby and you're out. In Japan, you like cannot leave the hospital for a week. Like, they make sure in that week you're taken care of because they know once you leave the hospital, right, you're on full-time care. So they teach you how to do all the things. They teach you how to swaddle your baby. They teach you how to feed your baby. You know, it's not this like rushed care in doing these things. And like, I think that's also kind of changed my viewpoint on having kids because at first I was like, there's no way, like I could not afford this. I can't, you know, would not be able to only take 6 weeks or 12 weeks. Like, how are you supposed to get to know your baby in 3 months, you know, and get to know your baby and then have to then, you know, like you said, ship them off to a stranger. And, you know, then I'm working to just pay for this childcare. Like in Japan, you have up to a year of maternity leave. And then if you cannot secure daycare, which they also have public daycares, which are subsidized, if you cannot secure that daycare, then you get up to another year. So you can essentially be able to stay home with your baby for 2 years. And on top of that, like they also have paternity leave. So husbands and fathers, or, you know, just like the male person in your partnership is also allowed to have, you know, a year off too. And this is all paid. You know, it's not like you're pulling into FMLA like a lot of people have to do in the US. It's not like you're claiming disability to just get some kind of subsidy. So it really opened my eyes to like the difference in healthcare in the US versus, you know, other places, which I would say like even Japan's not the best. You know, it's not the marker for healthcare, but it is like very different from the US. I also wonder too if like some of this pressure comes from like being an overachiever. You know, essentially like hitting these milestones in my life already and like just like, oh yeah, that's just another milestone that's going to be like expected of me to hit, you know, and I'll hit it whenever blah, blah, blah thing comes. So I wonder if there's also some kind of pressure from that too. Like you've done all the things, you know, you've done the college, you've done the education, you've done, so like what's next? As though like me being independent and me being just like in a marriage is not enough. I don't know. Just some thoughts.
I mean, it makes sense. It's always that kind of, in part, I guess, the you pressure that you're putting on, but also the, man, who are you checking these boxes for?
Yeah.
Because I know, like, sometimes I've considered it, I'm just like, man, everyone wants me to have a kid. Maybe I should have a kid.
Let me just go pick one up.
I really do. Like, I entertain the thought for all of like 2 seconds, and I'm like, that doesn't even make any sense. But I could imagine if people have that more aggressively in their life all the time, I'm sure eventually it wears on you. You're just like, man, everyone says that I should have a kid. Maybe I should have a kid. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Like, it's literally every conversation whenever Isaac and I call home. So when are you guys going to have kids? And, like, I understand, you know, they're excited. Isaac's the youngest child. I'm the middle child, the most able now to have children. So my little brother better not be having any children anytime soon. But, you know, like, but I also wonder, too, like, does it have to be? Like, does that have to be your guys' first question? Like, why are we all so conditioned to have these questions about, you know, and also, like, you know, I feel like a lot of times right now, the narrative that's coming on, like the discourse coming out is like, you shouldn't ask people about when are they having kids or, you know, XYZ thing, because you don't know, like, you don't know their fertility. And that's like, it can be potentially very harmful or hurtful to like ask people something that, you know, they might not have the ability to do.
Mm-hmm. It is off the table forever.
So,
man, ask me other things. How's my mental health? How's my yoga regimen coming?
Facts.
Like, ask me those questions. You know, ask me about those things. Except, you know, if I'm having a rough month, like, don't ask me about those things. Just like,
don't ask me nothing, actually.
Ask me what like I had for breakfast or something. You know, Keep it light.
Or like ask me what I need. You know, like what do you need at this moment? Everybody asks, wants me to need something, but I don't need those things.
That'd be really nice.
I think too, like going into this new upcoming year, like with the career shift, I've had to think about those things more often. Like, no, I cannot get pregnant in this year because XYZ thing. Like, I'm about to start this new position. Like, that is not the best way to start this position. And, like, no, we cannot, like, get pregnant at this time because blah, blah, blah. Like, if I keep putting it off, though, like, is it ever going to happen?
I know. That's especially, I don't know if I would ever, I will say I've never put off kids because of work. That's never been if I'm not going to have kids, it has nothing to do with work.
But I think it's also different.
In the sense that, like, I'm putting my career above children. I do recognize that there is difficulty in having kids in this current work environment. And that work is also inherently one of the strains in the sense of, like, money. But it's never been like, man, advancement in my career versus kids.
But I wonder, like, I was having this conversation with Isaac. Also, by the way, should I say it? Like, I'm moving into an assistant principal role this next year. So whatever. And I was having this conversation with Isaac because there is another principal at my school who's a male and his wife just gave birth, like, in his first year of being AP. And, like, he didn't have to worry. Like, he could show up to the hospital and, like, okay, the baby's here. Whereas, like, as a woman, like, at 38 weeks, 39 weeks, you cannot be in the school. Like, you're just, like, kind of waiting for the baby to come. So I think it's also different in that way that I'm, like, thinking about how do I navigate this new thing. And I don't think, obviously no one would ever hold it against me if I were to, like, choose to have a kid at this point. But I think for myself, I'd be like, man, you couldn't even last a year.
But it's not like you're having the kids for an out.
Yeah, exactly.
Could you imagine, like, oh, this is stressful. You know what we gotta do? Have a kid.
Right now.
It'd make this really nice a year off. So.
It'd be really great 9 months from now.
Oh, man. So I don't know. So then does that mean that you have, like, do you even have times anymore? Do you have a timeline? Is it a thing?
All I know in terms of, like, timeline, like, my mom had me at 37. Like, I know I got until 37. I would say that I had a pretty, solid childhood with having a 37-year-old as my mom. Was she always the oldest parent? Yeah, but she also, she, like, kept up with the young parents, too. I think that's, like, I feel like age is all a mindset,
That's not what your knees be saying.
I mean, besides my knee saying that, but I think that's also, like, my fault. Like, I could be more active. I could be, I could be doing things to help rehabilitate my knees. But, yeah, I just, like, I think again, like, women have a finite time, or, like, biologically female people have a finite time. We only have so many eggs in our ovaries. So, that is something that I kind of think about a lot, is that there is a biological clock. I would say I would like to have my first child by 30. So we'll see. We have a little bit of time to go until then.
Not much,
but, we'll see.
Because you are bleep years old, okay?
Closer to 30 than I am to 25.
So put it that way. So I'm just saying,
yeah,
I'm not rushing you. You can have kids whenever, or don't have kids.
Yeah, exactly.
It is what it is.
And that's what I think too, right? Like, I can, but I don't have to either. Like, I'm very conscious of the climate, things like that. Like, do I want to bring a human into this very confusing and, like, will we even have an Earth? Is that a very, like, controversial statement for me to make? I don't know. Like, Texas keeps freezing. Why does that keep happening?
I have never missed so many days due to snow and ice growing up as I have in the past 3 years.
In all bleep years of your life, right? Like, this has been
the most. I can count on all of 2 fingers how many times I've missed school on account of ice growing up as a child, like, as a student.
And I remember, like, I think our first year of teaching was one of those years that Austin actually had, like, sticking snow. Do you remember that? And you're like, I moved to Fort Worth because I heard there was more snow than in Austin, and Austin got the snow. And you're like, this is weird. And then, year 4, whatever year that was after the pandemic, when we had the Snowmageddon, we were shut down. Were y'all shut down last year as well?
I remember I have missed at least one day of school every year since Snowmageddon.
Yeah,
on
and
account of ice and snow.
Even before Snowmageddon, we had, like, 1 or 2 days, but it was never to the point where we were out for a week. Like, y'all were out for a week this year. So, it's just, like, one of those things I'm just like, do I really want to bring a child into this earth, not even knowing like this changing climate. Like there's so many natural disasters that are happening. I'm like, y'all, we've been warning you, but okay.
It's odd. It's fine. Ultimately, I don't know. I truly do understand the concept of the right time. And I understand because some of these things are definitely things that you want. I mean, you want your children and your friends and your family to have things like careers and stability and prosperity. So I get those things. I get those questions. I understand that for some people, children bring a lot of happiness. I totally get that. And I totally get that for some people, marriages bring a lot of happiness. But I will say that I enjoy being a part of a generation that is at least asking questions of these things and also being very okay with saying, actually, it's not that this might not ever be for me, but it's definitely not for me right now. And it doesn't have to be for me in the next 6 months or the next year. It can be for me when it is for me, when I'm ready for that. And, I've seen the arguments from especially older people that love to just say, you're so selfish. And I just don't understand. Cause like, what else is there? Who else is there for me to be happy for? I'm not having kids for your enjoyment. I don't understand.
Like, I also don't understand that, like, saying, oh, you're so selfish for not wanting kids. Actually, you're very selfish for wanting children, right? Because a lot of times, I'm not going to say all the time, but why procreate other than to, like, make little yous? Like, how selfish is that? As if the world needs more little yous, But again,
it's the most biologically selfish act you could make. It's to say, I'm so great that there should be more of me.
And again, we're not, undermining that people do get real, joy and happiness. But when you come out and you're saying like, oh, it's so selfish for you to not have kids. No, it's selfish for you to continue to inhabit these, like, to have your children now have to like survive. They didn't ask to be born.
So the least I can do is help them be happy.
Like, I cannot. And if they're happy, like, by not having children, that's totally fine too. I will say though, because I did have older parents, and my parents had older parents too. Well, my mom did at least. I didn't get as much time with my grandparents that I would have wished for. And I see with my nephews getting to spend time with my parents and, really getting to value that time, that there are parts of me that I'm like, oh, I do want to see like my parents as grandparents with my kids. But again, like, I'm happy for them being grandparents for my nephews. Like, that is sometimes enough for me too. Like, I just wanted them to experience, being a grandparent, especially because we had such good memories with our grandparents and, those types of relationships and things like that. But
on the flip side, again, there's not as much of a gap between my generation, my mom and my father, and then their parents. And there still wasn't all that much time in terms of like, yes, I got to know my grandma up until like the early parts of my adulthood. But like, by all measurements in terms of like what you're referring to, that should still be something that I'm able to enjoy at this time. So ultimately, late parents, early parents, young parents, older like there's no ever guarantee on anything.
Facts. Yeah, that's true.
And so even if you are having kids young, that's not to say that you'll be around for 4 or 5 generations just because, well, if you're having kids every 20 years, and people are living up to 60, 80 years old, then you should see XYZ. There's no guarantee about any of those things. So I think even then for me to know that generationally, my generations were all pretty close, and to still not necessarily have those same strong experiences, it really solidifies for me that I'm going to do the things that are right for my timeline. Because there's no guarantee that it's going to happen any other way, even if I have a kid right now.
Yeah. It's that finite, right? Like, it's just, everything exists. Finite. Everything exists on a finite timeline.
And there's no guarantee that you can make a timeline fit what you want it to do. As I've gotten older, I have gone more okay with doing things in a more natural timeline. There are certain parts of the timeline that really stress me out, and that is totally fine as well. But there are certain things that I don't rush anymore. I'm not going to rush into a marriage anymore. I'm not going to rush into having children, making that sort of, quote unquote traditional family, which first of all, for me was not going to be traditional to begin with. So why rush into it anyway? But that's neither here nor there. And then I think something that I have more recently learned to let go of is the concept of like rushing through a career, of really trying to rush to the highest position, to have arrived at whatever that like that sense of finality in your career. I'm just like, I will get there when I am good and ready. Wherever there is, I will get there when I am good and ready. And I just really want to make sure, because it is all finite, it's all limited. I do want to make sure that I am doing my best to enjoy all of the parts and days that go into that finite time.
Yeah.
And I ain't trying to fit no one else's timeline into what I have planned for my life.
There you go.
Outside of the universe, because whatever the universe got planned, I can't do nothing about.
That's gonna happen. Sorry. In your wood dog year.
It's just gonna be what it is, okay? The universe has spoken and such, so it will be.
Okay. I felt like that was like a pretty good like final thoughts. Do you have extra final thoughts on that?
I don't think so. So don't ask me no more when I'm having kids, because I can assure you, if you know me, you'll know when I'm having kids and when I'm getting married, because it's going to be everywhere. I'm going to let you know. There will be invitations. There will be letters. It will be posted you'll know. Okay. I promise you, it will not be a secret. So when my marriage is happening, when I'm having children, when I get a promotion, y'all will know.
I feel like
when it's happening. So don't ask me no more.
When I have kids, like I really do want it to be a secret. Like I just want it to happen. And then like, like just like, oh, here's the baby. That's the announcement. I want to be in the right headspace.
Different strokes for different folks. I want everyone to know. I want parties. I want gifts. I want snacks. I want all of it. The whole experience. I will not be having a gender reveal party because that's dumb.
No, those should not exist. Gender is a construct, everyone.
Especially if I set half of California on fire because of my gender reveal party.
Or if you turn an entire sacred waterfall. I think it was in Brazil, wasn't it? Blue. Did you see that one? They dyed the waterfall blue, and it's like actually very harmful for the dye was very harmful for the environment.
That is wild. No, I'm not gonna do all that.
Mm-mm.
But I will have a destination baby shower. So
there you go. That's how you do it.
But no, those are my final thoughts. So with that, Emma, it is time for our...
Oh wait, I didn't get my final thoughts. What the heck?
I thought those were your final thoughts.
Oh,
Awkward.
don't dye a waterfall blue. That was not my final. My final thoughts are, unless you're paying for this anything, you do not get a say. Okay, that's it. That's the tweet.
That's it, because I'll stay at home and do all the things.
Yes.
Just kidding. I won't. I'm going to still do me.
It was Brazil. Sorry. The blue waterfall was Brazil. They got fined. Lots of money.
I would hope so. Wild. Well, in that case, for real this time, it's time for our...
Rapid fire question!
All right, Emma, what question did you bring today?
Because this is our final February episode. I mean, there's only 2 that ever come out usually per month, but because this is our second one, my question is based in love. What is your favorite love song? Actually, you know what? Let me change it. What is your favorite like pump up song? Now that we're talking about like the right time to do things, like what's the thing that gets you motivated?
I think recently I have been really energized by Megan Thee Stallion's more recent album, Traumazine.
Yes.
Please, Emma, make sure you tag Megan Thee Stallion in this post. Okay?
I will.
Because she needs to know that I really enjoyed her album.
That you get pumped up to her.
Really gets me hyped, really helps me start and feel confident about a lot of things when I'm tackling stuff. So I'm just saying, please go ahead and tag Megan Thee Stallion in today's episode. Okay?
I will. H-Town. Fellow Texan.
Not even from there, but you know what? I am a fellow Texan, so I will rep it if I need to, okay?
That support. Okay, so like in the way that I said pump up, I don't know why I said pump up, because I've been listening to like real chill, like neo soul, like funk, because I feel like that's been the thing that's been calming me down and really centering me when I go to work. And before, like on the way, when I used to work in Texas, like I used to be like all about, Meg Thee Stallion, Cardi B, like that was like my pump up playlist, because I was like, oh, I need to like get in there. But now I'm like, I actually need to chill so I can breathe, wake up in the morning. So the thing that's been really energizing me is there's several actually. There's this like playlist on Spotify. It's called Low Key. Also, the Soul Coffee playlist is also one of my faves. Like, it just always has like new hits and like new stuff coming out. Sometimes even like old songs come in there. So I think that's kind of been where I've been at in terms of pump up and like, yes, let's get this day. Let's do it.
Okay, that was an alternative answer. I wasn't ready for.
I know. Sorry. I was like, as I realized after I asked pump up, I was like, why did you ask that? You don't pump up to nothing no more.
Not about that life no more. It's okay. It's all temporary. Fine. You might be tomorrow.
Yes, true.
You never know.
Okay, what's your question for today?
My question is, how judgmental are you towards or about other people?
Oh, I actually found myself doing this way often, and I had to sit down and have a conversation with Isaac. Like, you know what? I should not be as judgmental when I come into these spaces. Like, I think that there's been a lot of times, I'm going to just say it for what it is, where I've been in professional development and different presentations, and when old white men come onto the screen, I'm like, I shut down. And I don't mean to. Most of the time I do mean to. But then I realize that, you know what? I should be more open-minded. My prefrontal cortex is fully developed now. I should still be listening and be respectful and then take what they say with a grain of salt most of the time. But I do find myself to be very judgmental when I see like keynote speakers and things like that. I'm like, the math is not mathing. What about you?
I am slower to judge, but once I've made that judgment, it's hard for me to unwrite it. So if I've already decided that you're a certain kind of person, and I do really try my best to give multiple opportunities because I am aware that circumstantially things happen. But I give you about 2 or 3, and then after that, I have decided whether you are reliable, whether you are friendly, whether you are inconsistent, whether you are well-dressed or not. I have given you that time to, okay, let's see what it is. And I think also part of it is just everyone has facets too. So there's not ever like an overall judgment, but I will make judgments about certain parts of you, your presentation, your personality, whatever you call it, whatever is relevant at the time. I will make judgments after I've gotten to know you. So like, I would say I am judgmental, but in a slow and methodical way. And once it's there, it's there.
Do you find that like, I think a lot of people just like are naturally biased. I think that just kind of, it is what it is. Like, it's very hard to be unbiased to certain things. Do you find yourself that after that first impression, it stays the same? Or have you ever been like pleasantly surprised? Like, actually, no, you're pretty cool.
Yeah, all the time. People definitely like, again, part of it is just circumstantial. And so sometimes there's just like a lack of depth in an interaction with a person. And then sometimes there's a lack of depth and interaction with a person. And then there is, and you're like, oh, I was wrong. Please get away from me.
I will say that I think I'm pretty quick to that. And then as, time goes on, I'm like, actually, no, my first impression was pretty good. Like, I think I'm pretty like, I've been proven right more times than I've been proven wrong. But I don't know if I'm going into all these interactions of like, oh, I already have this like view on this person. So I know I'm not going to like get along with them.
Confirmation bias.
Yeah. So that's what I also think happens too. But yeah, a lot of times I'm just like, yeah, and I can avoid. But I will say that there have been times where like I get into like something and I'm like, oh yeah, we could be friends. And then later on I'm like, would pass.
So yes, I am quite judgmental. I will own that. I do try my best to withhold judgment for 2 to 3 interactions. But then after that, yes, I do make a judgment and I do tend to stick to said judgment. And I don't know what else you want from me. It is what it is. I am not going to make a commitment to change. I'm not. It's my life. It'd be like that. So that was wonderful. I actually like that question. Thank you so much, Book of Questions. But in any case, Emma, where can people find the podcast?
You can find our podcast on Instagram and Twitter at The Tea with Crema. If you'd like to buy us a cup of coffee or a cup of tea, you can also Venmo us at The Tea with Crema. You can also stream our podcast anywhere that you like to stream, such as YouTube or Spotify or Apple Music. We hope to see you next time. Bye!
I was hoping he was still going to be in there because they're going to be like, Emma, where can people find the Isaac?
Right behind me, opening up all the drawers!